Okay.
Just give me a second. It takes that 30. So we'll have a separate conversation, but not live. Yeah, brainstorming.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we are live now.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Um, well, welcome to the FORSEA dialogue on democratic struggles across Asia. Although we bill ourselves as a Southeast Asia regional organization, or more like a network of scholars and activists, pushing for democratization and promotion and protection of human rights. We work across essentially Asian continents. Um, I am very privileged and honored to have my brother, James Gomez, Dr. Gomez, uh, for many within Southeast Asia, and particularly those who fight for human rights, need no introduction. He headed the Amnesty International of Southeast Asia, for a while, and he is now running the Asia Center as the regional director. He's an accomplished scholar, a researcher, and engaged, citizen of Southeast Asia. Today we'll talk about two things. One is specifically how Myanmar's State Administration Council, which the Burmese people view as nothing more than armed gang of terrorists terrorizing citizens. How this terrorist gang used or has used the internet, in various strategic ways, as it attempts to, to establish control of state organs and society and the entire population. And then the second part, a substantial part, will be devoted to Asia Center's, what I would call like a landmark study of, how authoritarian regimes use the internet and the different platforms through legal frameworks, through physical control of the content, and also the control of the infrastructure of the internet itself. And so welcome, Dr. Gomez.
Oh, thank you, Brother Zani, Dr. Zani. Happy to be here. We have had collaborations and interactions over the recent years, and I'm so happy to be here and be part of the work that you have been doing for a lot of us in the region. So thank you very much, and happy to be here today. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just ask you, because you did a rather clear study of how the military in Myanmar, since the February 1st coup, attempted to use the internet for its nefarious strategic purposes. You've got a very clear timeline that you've drawn up, from February until, I believe, the end of March. Can you talk about your study and what you find, with respect to the Burmese military's uses of the internet, or more like
Yes.
misuses of internet?
Yes. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we were in the position to observe the developments from 1st February, and we have put out a series of briefing notes. The first one covered the first 15 days, because usually when it comes to internet shutdowns, the early days are crucial. It clearly signposts for you, the agenda and what's their end game is. So we did a quick briefing note, and then we tracked the whole situation for another 60 days, and we put together a fuller briefing note. We are currently looking at, we are tracking developments every day, really, and we want to put put up a report in the next couple of months, a more substantial one, where when we really know what the Myanmar government is up to in relation to internet freedoms. But the one thing I would say upfront for all your viewers and listeners, and I think it's very relevant for the region, Myanmar under the junta has unfortunately become an example in the shift in tactics. This is key because up to today, most autocrat or autocratic regimes have focused on content regulation and content censorship, right? It has been made easy by grafting on technology and surveillance and to monitor the content, and they came up with laws to take these content producers as well as content sharers or disseminators down, right? But it's not cheap work. It's expensive work. It's laborious. So these guys in the junta shifted tactics to a mass shutdown. Now, and I think this is something that's going to be aped across the autocratic regimes in the region and beyond. So I think that's the first, feature that we got to keep our eye on. And I will, in the next minutes, unpack, some of the contours around it. We already had indications now because the junta was unsettled following the 2008 constitution. I mean, we know there are problems with that and the referendum. We know the problems with the elections after that. But nevertheless, since 2013, the thing that has irked the junta more than anything else is the liberalization of the telecommunication sector, right? So gradually, they began to lose control of the narrative. So while we had things, our eyes on the usual moving parts, this was something I think, we knew there were, incarcerations and problems, challenges, but we didn't see how big a problem it is for them because it shifted the narrative, right? So for 10 years, they were in this, zone where the narrative was being challenged, slightly shifting and things like that. So what they are doing now is to try to re-establish that narrative fully, right? So they had the concerns were raised. If you look into the UN documents, I mean, we all have problems with the efficacy of the UN instruments, but nevertheless, the documents, tell us a lot. If you look at the special rapporteur's reports since 2008, Thomas, Yang Hee Lee, and then most recently Andrew, because Andrew has not been into the country yet, but still, put up a couple of things. You can see they have in their reports already tracked this shift and this concern, right? And more vividly, we saw in 2019 the internet shutdowns in Rakhine State and Chin. This is just an acceleration and an expansion of that experiment they had. So they are using tools, right? I mean, legal tools. So first they got rid of the constitution and declared the emergency regulations, and then they tried to squirrel in the cybersecurity draft law, which got leaked and then became problematic in terms of PR. And then, so what they did was they moved to the two other laws, the electronic transaction law, as well as the one with the people's privacy. In these two laws, they smuggled in those, contentious clauses that was in the, now I would call the abandoned cybersecurity law. And if you put a clinical eye to the legislation, you will see what they did was they removed data protection and privacy. That means they gave them unlimited and unchecked snooping powers, right? So that's what they did, right? Because they want to be able to, push you off the internet. But there was a problem. The problem is they didn't foresee when you do a mass shutdown, it's going to impact the electronic economy, the banking and the ATMs and all that kind of stuff. Now, although Myanmar is just coming in, I mean, statistically, is the internet concentration penetration is still low compared to some of the other major countries in the region, but it's picking up gradually. Even then, there was an impact. So now, what they are, with this slight, comeback on the internet, what they are trying to do is really to experiment. How can I shut off the internet for activism and citizen participation while I continue to grease the hands of my cronies through internet banking, money transfers, and keep all that, financial business. I mean, this is very important for the Tamador because, that's why they did the constitution the way they did, so that they can maintain their financial independence by, sucking in revenue from the key business areas of sectors of businesses they can profit from, so they are an entity on their own and they are financially affected. You will know that they are affected by the sentiment from the ground. In Asia Center, right, when we, were putting out our studies and we were experimenting with some of the recommendations to see what people in the country would prefer. Of course, we were in touch with them anonymously for their safety and all of that. The one thing they weren't very keen in our report was the recommendation to restore financial services. They said, James, I think that's something we are not so keen at the moment because we want to corner this cronies and others by cutting off, the financial stream and business stuff. So if the banking sector is open, right, they will get a lifeline. So I think this is what the Tamador is doing in terms of the internet. So trying to have a two-tier system. But unfortunately for them, never, underestimate the tenacity of the people. So I think what I would say the 10-year, well, not really even 10-year, because 7 or 8 years only since the liberalization of the telecommunication sector, you have also have a new generation of socialized people, young people in particular, whose, I think, spirit and energy you can't dissipate just by technology control. I would just sort of step one, because, Myanmar is a very complex country geographically. So I just want to contour a little bit of what I said here moving forward. So I think they will inevitably bring back the internet in a more controlled form. And we can see some of the thinking here. It will also be a year or two of new and knee-jerk legislation, like the one we just saw a couple of days ago on the outlawing of the satellite dishes. As soon as people find a way, right, they will, block the corner. This is my kind of crystal ball gazing in a very, very shifting environment. I think they will bring back the internet, a controlled internet where they can do business, but put everybody out. I think how they will do it is, I think they will graft some kinds of surveillance onto technology, because technology is still the most pervasive and cheapest way to monitor people and to express content. I think this would probably be deployed strategically in the urban areas, areas where there's a stability, not only of the internet, but of electricity, because these things go hand in hand. I think we will also see a higher rollout of CCTVs in this dense area. But in the rural areas, in the areas where there's less penetration, and also in the ethnic areas, I think they would use maybe more mobile tracking devices, such as things that have been coming up to us with contact tracing and things like that. as a result of COVID. That means mobile phone tracking, yeah,
Right.
and also the traditional, as we know, the MI, the old days there where the MIs will literally clumsily parade around your hotel or come and intervene in your activities. I think we will still see that some of that old world surveillance complementing so three dimensions. One is just internet, very urban, CCTV. Then in the rural areas where we have connectivity, tracking through mobile apps, and that form. And finally, in those areas, and possibly even in the ethnic areas, they will use informants and the old style, face-to-face, type of surveillance. I'll pause there for now, and I'm happy to.
Yeah, I want us to go back to the timeline that you laid out in that brief, right? And just a couple of things, that need to be clarified for the viewers.
Sure.
As you well know, Myanmar or Burma today doesn't have the popularly accepted government as such, and although the Burmese military staged a coup 3 months ago, it has been completely unable to get a functional state or functional economy up and running as the direct result of different types of movements, including these, civil servants, a boycott called a civil disobedience movement, right? This is like happening across the country in all sectors of the state. And private sector also participates in this economic boycott of the military. And of course, you've got the protest movement on the streets of different parts of the country, all across Burma, right? And then we've got heavy fightings going on where the military junta is losing, massive, the number of its troops. Like even in the last few days, that they've lost hundreds of soldiers in different regions, Kachin and Karen states, as well as in Chin state, right? And people also openly resorting to exercise of the right to self-defense, using homemade, explosive devices and whatnot, burning down. And so basically, we are looking at not a normal, a country situation where, even by ASEAN standards, an authoritarian regime is running things, right? But that's not the case in Burma. We are in the, and so, but what I want to ask you is that to walk us through, how the military junta, starting in the early mornings of the February 1st, resorted to various strategies of information control, from complete internet blackout. As you also know, and also in your study you noted that Myanmar has experienced the longest internet shutdown in Chin and Rakhine state, right? That happened under Aung San Suu Kyi's watch, because the National League for Democracy government that was ousted, in the coup, was in charge of Ministry of Telecommunications. It was not constitutionally under the Commander-in-Chief's control and command, right? So can you tell the viewers how the military attempted to cut the information, this in the cyberspace, basically, full cuts, as you know, this like scorched earth policy of cutting like rebellious communities of supplies, new recruits, information, and physical movements, all that stuff. Full cuts. We all know this. This was used in Malaysia, Malayu at the time, against the communists, against the British and whatnot, right? So now this is the fifth dimension of the full cut. in the cyberspace. Can you explain that? That is really crucial, because I thought like you got your finger on this with your timeline.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zani. Happy to walk your viewers through the timeline. So first, the instrument. The instrument is the Telecommunications Law, Section 77. Something, of course, that has been flagged by many international observation as being problematic because it gives them the power to shut it down. So that's the tool, right? So they activated the tool. The authority that was activating the tool was the Ministry of Transport and Communication. So how did they activate it? They activated it by issuing a ban. A ban to whom? Ban to the telecommunication operators, and we have 4 in Myanmar. To block specific guideline was to block access to social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp. Now, the directive was to block them until 7th of February. Now, I think they didn't quite get the initial days right because we didn't really experience a shutdown as such complete. What we experienced in the language that we use for studies such as this is the throttling of internet speed. So really that's what you experience. They throttle the speed, especially through this platform. So that's why many people, immediately after all the media and the internet was shut down in major cities like Naypyidaw, Yangon, and Mandalay, from the second day, what people experienced was this partial kind of connectivity, slow, laborious, and annoying even, because it was well below the normal level. So I think while we, commonly use the word, internet shutdowns, I think in the early days, we may also use the word the throttling of internet speeds as to, because autocrats.
How does the internet speed affect the user's capacity to
it just takes longer to load, so you'll be waiting, and your message wouldn't go through, your messages don't get sent, you don't receive things, and of course it also creates a lot of frustration, so oftentimes you just abandon, right, and come back to it later, hopefully things sort out. So it creates that kind of feeling. Now, so that's what happened. On the first and the second was the speed. So as I mentioned earlier, it was the directive then was issued to the internet service providers on 3rd of February by the Ministry of Transport and Communication, and then specifically to block Facebook, which is popular, and of course the Messenger, Facebook, and then WhatsApp. Now, then that was not good enough because people jump ship, right? They use the other popular handles such as Instagram and Twitter. So 2 days later, they figured out, okay, people are sort of scooting around and doing other things. So on 5th February, the MOTC, the Ministry of Transport and Communication, extended the ban to Twitter and Instagram, right? And so just to come back, they were throttling the internet speed. They were blocking access to social media. Now, it was 1 week later, on the 7th of February, where they, imposed the shutdown. They imposed the shutdown because it was in response to the mass protests and connectivity. Therefore, the minute you shut down the internet, everything went down. So let's unpack this clearly. So we have the first week slowdown of internet and access to social media platform, the full one. They started firstly with Facebook and WhatsApp, then they expanded to Twitter and Instagram. Then 1 week later, they shut the internet down. When they shut the internet down, the Tamada also affected itself, because this is where the banking and other things, got into going, right? Then another week later, they realized, the phones, right? Phones have internet, people were doing shared hotspots and all that. So on 15 March, they decided they will disable mobile data throughout the whole country. And then they also put the timing, the internet curfews, on 15 February, where, the internet was shut in the morning, 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. And of course, there were a lot of speculation as to why this was so. There are two theories broadly. One, that they wanted to shut the internet down so they could sort of pause and track who's saying what, and find out the perpetrators. Secondly, there was speculation there was surveillance technology being delivered. I've always been so far been looking for the smoking gun, but what public impressions are, and it has to be validated, is that China has been the one supplying these technology tools, and these were being grafted. So I come back to my opening remark that I do expect the internet to be slowly released, but I think it will have some kind of grafted surveillance on it, right? So we and the final dates really is 18th of March. So 18th of March, they began to limit, access to public networks, and also other bits, right? It happens in most countries, but in Myanmar, the whole wiki wars, right, where they started editing pages and the use of words such as the military junta, coup, and things like that. So since February, I think the first 2 weeks were crucial. They were learning how to deal with it, and then about a month and a half later, in March, they began to even deal with mobile data and public access. So we are now a 1.5 months from that deadline, and we see a slight limited release over the internet. And I expect them to be cautious about this. They're more interested in the elites having access to the outside world and information, as well as for the finance part. But I think we'll have to see how things go. And yeah, those were the immediate timelines in the first 2 months.
I mean, there are international actors involved as service providers, such as the Norway's Telenor Group and also Qatar's Ooredoo, right? Those are two major, the service providers with but quite possibly the largest share of customers in Burma, right? And also earlier you talked about the internet penetration. Now we are looking at a 54 million the people country, with say about half, 50%, between 43 and 50% penetration. So basically we're looking at close to 30 million people, or 25, 26 million people, right? Being deprived of the access to the internet, mobile data, Wi-Fi services, mobile, and also access to different social media platforms. So, in the early days of the social media blockade, if you will, when we say internet in Burma, we basically mean in the Facebook. Facebook penetration is very, very high. Yeah, even if the internet penetration into residential areas may be lower, but Facebook penetration is very, very high, and Facebook was very effectively used in the campaign against Rohingya, right? Mobilizing public sentiments, poisoning the public mind, so that the entire the multi-ethnic, the multi-faith, even Muslims in Burma, would get behind the military's campaign of terror against Rohingya, right? So the military junta clearly knew how effective a tool the internet, and particularly Facebook, could be yeah, for whatever the good or negative purposes. And so that was one of the reasons that they try to the block the social media platforms. And from my own understanding, the outside milk tea alliance and other tech savvy groups, as well as the one of the largest hacking groups in the world, anonymous, Central and others, have attempted to help the Burmese the democracy activists on the ground. Right, they were providing different type of VPN, right, to bypass the social media blockade. So can you shed light on how the particularly the powerful corporate entities that are operating in Burma, like Telenor, right, and Ooredoo, responded to these like 7 p.m. Orders coming from the military council, right, to shut down, from 1 o'clock at night to 9 o'clock in the morning, right? How did the corporate entities, yeah, and they're from particularly Norway, it's a very free and liberal and progressive country. How did like the Telenor Myanmar respond to being basically pressurized or ordered to shut down? Because the military, as you noted in your study, the military junta evoked or like applied this a national emergency clause in the contracts and all the laws that govern the internet the service provision.
Sure, certainly. There are 4 internet companies or service providers. I think the one that put his head out and made statements was really Telenor.
To its credit, I must say.
Yeah, and put out statements, expressing grave concerns about the order to block access to social media. And it was putting out updates regularly in the first 2 weeks about the requests that came from the junta. So the public were kept informed about what the junta was asking the telecommunication companies to do. However, after the second week or so, Telenor announced it will no longer be making those announcements because I believe they've been told not to make the announcements. But of course, as all corporate entities, they put it in terms of safety and concern of their staff and employees and families. So that's Telenor. But moving away from Telenor, we also will look at a few of the key handles, social media platforms that also put out comments. The first one was Facebook. It did so immediately. So Telenor, after the first February coup, Telenor came up with a statement on the 3rd Feb. Facebook also came up with this comment on 3rd February, designating Myanmar as a temporary high-risk location. Going into nearly a week, on 6th February, Twitter expressed its concern over the blockage of its service in Myanmar because they were blocked, I think, on the 5th. And then on 12th February, Facebook responded by blocking the junta's account, citing reasons of disinformation. And then almost nearly 2 weeks later, on 24th Feb, Facebook and Instagram also banned again the military accounts, including some of the military control pages. So this was, within the month that, technology companies were active in putting out statements and responding. But I want to bring one other point to attention to your viewers is, and this is a pressure point that has not been explored, is Vietnam. Because Vietnam is a joint venture, is in joint venture with Mytel. And
what is the group's name in Vietnam?
It's the Ministry of Defense, of course, in Vietnam. So I think there's a pressure point there to put a spotlight on Myanmar and put a spotlight on the Ministry of Defense of Myanmar for being in joint partnership with Mytel, which is owned by the Burmese junta. And I guess we will have to soil them that way too, because otherwise, without putting a spotlight on them, they should be held accountable for their complicit behavior in contributing to the internet shutdowns, and of course, and its related repression on the people of Myanmar. So I found it quite appalling that, in the recent ASEAN summit and discussion, such, obvious information in public knowledge was not used, even diplomatically, to call for Vietnam's cooperation or in the civil society manner to call it out. So I think that's something we should put front and center, because part of the responsibility countries in the region need to have is the propping up of other very, very bad regimes that do harm to their own people.
Well, obviously, sorry to interrupt. Obviously, ASEAN is not known for protection of freedom of speech or expression, across the board. I mean, of the 10 ASEAN members, only 2 can be considered a democratic, a functioning democracy. That although Malaysian democratization process has stalled, as you know, but the rest of them are variously authoritarian and I would say the dodgy regimes. And Vietnam is a one-party communist / socialist state, right? And then so what we have, if I understand you correctly, is a situation where a regime such as the State Administration Council of Myanmar, the coup regime, which is unacceptable even by ASEAN standards, right? You've got ASEAN was split, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, took great pains to distance themselves from the regime and openly denounce the violence. Even Singapore would, join this denunciation of the use of terroristic methods against citizens. But then you've got a second tier, plus Thailand, right? Like Vietnam, Laos, and other Cambodia, they kept quiet. But in the case of Vietnam and Thailand, speaking of propping up and protecting the terroristic regimes such as Burma's today, they are in active collaboration, either openly or quietly. In the case of the Thai military junta itself, Thailand's not a democratic country, they're not even by a long shot, right? And so there are birds of the same feather, they're sticking together, right? And so this is deeply troubling. Well, we know, I mean, you mentioned it, that China's involvement in the internet shutdown, has been widely believed, if not proven, right? So this might be a good segue into, talking about your landmark study, yeah, and that you conducted, in collaboration with the Council of Asian Democrats and Liberals, right? And can you talk about your study? And as I understand it, it's a 66-page, seminal work in terms of research quality, covering about 12 countries in the Far East and Southeast Asia. To tell us the major findings, and what I find personally interesting was, your analysis, legal analysis, institutional analysis, and also discourse analysis. You broke down the fake news. Essentially, fake news is lie, right? And your fake news itself is euphemism. It's a lie. I mean, lie is a lie. Fake news. So tell us about this study.
Yeah, thank you, Zarni. That study is called Defending Freedom of Expression, Fake News Legislation in East Asia and Southeast Asia. I would like to just take a minute to step back to frame the logic of the study. Asia Center works in the area of freedom of expression, and we do so by looking at three subcomponents of expression under freedom of expression. That is academic freedom, press freedom, and internet freedom. Our preliminary research, based also on international rankings of various organizations that put out the annual rankings, we see a correlation that across the region. If your academic ranking is low, it's almost certain that your press and internet rankings will also similarly be aligned. Not to, just to call out Bangladesh. Bangladesh will consistently be very, very low on that front in South Asia. So will China and North Korea in East Asia, consistently across all three indexes. And in Southeast Asia, you will see places like Vietnam, Laos, Brunei over there. So coming back to the study, it's a 10 country study covering East and Southeast Asia. And what we were after was to look at the phenomena of fake news. Now, fake news, of course, was made famous by the former President Donald Trump, where he accused, fact-based independent media by calling their content fake news, right? Now, the difference in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, is that the executives or the authorities in power use the term fake news to discredit their political opponents. Now, what the political opponents broadly do is they call out the policy lapses and missteps of these regimes. But these regimes and the personalities are highly prickly. Therefore, they decided to roll out fake news laws. In some countries, they will have, and sometimes it's found in the penal code and not in specific fake news legislation, is attacks on dignity or insult, right? So these are the instruments they use to put the activists or critical voices on the back foot. And who are the critical voices from the region? They are activists, academics, they are civil society workers, and then we have media, journalists. These are the, and of course, politicians, usually, in the opposition, in the parliament or outside of parliament. So they've been using this as a tool because they no longer can control the national narrative. They have lost control of the national media. They no longer set the agenda. And if I may take a slight swipe at Singapore's Straits Times, they had the gall today to say they were not profitable, and therefore they want to become an NGO and source money from the public, for the stories they want to put together. I think the public should not be giving $1 to that, rag, a propaganda rag,
What do you mean, like propaganda for whom?
For the ruling regime, of course, for over 50 years, So, so this is the main concern, of the regimes, and that is why they use the term fake news to attack the critic, and it's been consistent. But there is a difference between East Asia and Southeast Asia. In our study, we didn't include China and North Korea, partly because of access, and also the China itself is so large it has to be studied on its own to have any significance. But in any case, what we found was East Asia tends to be generally freer compared to Southeast Asia.
You mean the, sorry, so let's break it down. You're talking about Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and Hong Kong, right? You included Hong Kong.
Yes,
but
yes.
then like, you know, whatever gains, democratic gains Hong Kong civil society had accomplished, they were made null and void by China's direct intervention. That's,
yes,
you know,
especially
how
with
I
this
understand,
the new
right?
security law. Yes,
That's right.
and we are still, not fully clear about the damage across freedoms the security law will deliver. I think will deliver to Hong Kong, but I believe self-censorship will accelerate across the freedoms of academia, press, and internet in Hong Kong. Yes, but these were the countries that the study looked at, and in relation to Southeast Asia. An emerging nugget in the research is really the a new area which I call foreign interference. Now, this has not been well articulated in the larger Asia in the way that it has been in North America and Europe, where the bogeyman is Russia. It is well articulated in Taiwan and moderately in Japan when it comes to China. And Taiwan has, and in the study we discuss the law about foreign interference and the penalties and the steps, both legal and non-legal, to deal with the interference. This phenomena is not discussed widely in Southeast Asia. Singapore has made some remarks about this phenomena and has announced that it's looking into possible legislation around it. Yeah. But from where I'm sitting in the region, I think this is partly because most of the countries, are taking dollars from China or renminbi, and therefore don't want to mention the country by name, right? But this is what is happening on the ground in relation to influence. I think the influence is occurring at the media level. Thailand, for example, Chinese media outlets or companies are buying small medias, just picking them up because, sustainability issues. Two, they are actually producing Thai language programs that speak favorably about China or negatively about, Europe or America in particular. And these are put on Thai media channels. So that's a big part. We have, I think, the people-to-people narrative taking place that we also need to be observed. They come in the form of foreign students. They enter both the Thai and the English language programs in Thailand. There's also a new development in tertiary education in Thailand, where some of the second and third tier Thailand universities actually have a mirror university fully for Chinese students, and all classes are in Chinese, and sizes can range to up a few hundred. Now, of course, COVID has put a spanner in a lot of this. That's one. And then, of course, the tourism, the sheer impact of the tourism is vast here. And of course, also investment in properties and other type of real estate. Now, I've kept my analysis in terms of foreign interference at a people-to-people level. Therefore, I've not mentioned the obvious, such as the One Belt, One Road dimension of it. I think in the coming years, we will naturally have to be cognizant of the this form of cross-border narrative, and delivered in a very, very insidious way. And I think even when this happens, because of the volume of trade or balance of deficit, as well as the people-to-people influence, and the large connectivity with the historical diaspora that has been re-synicized politically, and positively towards China, would be elements to watch.
Yeah,
but at the same time, please
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Finish your thought.
Yeah. And I wanted to say, at the same time, I'm doubtful that they will articulate it into a foreign interference law in the manner that Taiwan has. Even Japan is reluctant. It's only at the level of rhetoric. Yeah.
Right. This is something that is an elephant in the room, right? None of your studies touched on, as a centerpiece. But I think like this is something that we will have to have, a serious, focused conversation about, the impact of China, because if you recall, when Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was the head of state of Singapore, Singapore was exported as a model for other Asian countries to follow, right? That you can have prosperity without the what they consider destabilizing the democratic and free and liberal system, right? But Singapore, though it attempted to punch above its weight, by exporting the city-state as the model for other Asian countries to follow for development and development with tight political control. But Singapore never posed a threat to any other, the democratic movements. But obviously, the China is too significant an external interference, factor for anyone who fights for freedom of expression, civil and political rights. I want to ask you one thing, from your study. You look at the countries, in terms of their signatory status or lack thereof in the the UN Convention or Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights, and also the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. That's fascinating because my own country of Burma signed neither instrument, right? In other words, this whoever controlled the state is never committed to providing citizens, basically the internationally recognized Bill of Rights, the civil and political covenants, beyond the UDHR or Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And ASEAN is extremely, extremely weak. I think Malaysia, democratizing though it is, has signed neither either. Only two countries, Cambodia. Cambodia was rebuilt by the United Nations and donor money after the genocide, and so Cambodia signed all the right instruments. Whether or not it honors them under Hun Sen, over the last almost 30 years, a different matter, right? So the one is that the indicator, right? Indicator like whether the state as such is committed to providing or guaranteeing civil and political rights of citizens, right? That's one thing. And then the other one is the type of democracy. Sadly, in even in a country like Burma, where the democratic transition was prematurely and falsely celebrated as Myanmar Spring, 10 years ago, we ended up with basically the supermajority of the NLD. I appreciate NLD's role, but at the same time, it has had a detrimental impact on democratization because it has almost monopoly grip over the parliamentary process, barring the constitutional amendments that the military would not allow. And so if you had a good comparison between Far Eastern states, particularly Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, where the legislators are not so lopsided, in terms of one-party control, vis-a-vis, the other democracies in Southeast Asia. Say for instance, like in Malaysia, UMNO was the monopoly power. They're controlling the entire political spectrum, and then like Burma, and then Thailand is a military dictatorship. A softer, benign form compared with the Burmese dictatorship. So can you talk about those two factors? States and their commitments to the international legal regimes with respect to citizens' civil and political rights, and then the the lopsided nature of dominant political parties and how that impacted negatively on the freedom of expressions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the indicators is whether one set of indicators is whether there is multi-party legislature and independent institutions for checks and balances. So these need to go hand in hand. And you'll find that the phenomena, there's a higher incidence or correlation of these two elements in the East Asian countries studied, such as, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and of course, in a diminishing way, Hong Kong. You have less of that in Southeast Asia, and that also is part of the problem. Southeast Asia don't have multi-party democracies. If they do, the component parties are weak and kept on the back foot all the time through lawsuits and institutional restraints. And then they cringe at the thought of having independent institutions, because they can only, they have to be, unto themselves everything. They can't have independence. So this is an important indicator. But I would also like to provide your readers a little bit of a sophisticated kind of look at this phenomena. And I want to cast an eye on Taiwan. I think we have to be cautious about how things turn. And I'm using Taiwan only as an example, only as an illustration point, and we can add the same prism of analysis to any other country. So in Taiwan, we are celebrating Taiwan, as a democracy and as a site of values, and that's all very good. Part of it is also because of the value of the administration that is in power, the DPP. But the DPP is also young. Its voter base is young. But you really need to dissect the heart of Taiwan very, very clinically to understand right at the core is the KMT, right?
Well, they've been in power for basically since Taiwan was established, and
Absolutely.
the 1940, what was the year, 48, 49, I believe.
Yeah, and the socialized KMT values bureaucracy is extremely significant and powerful within. So this is why Taiwan has difficulty in steering the ship, because there's internal resistance because of that very hard opposite with opposite values KMT. So we need to know that when we talk about democratic transitions, in a place like Malaysia, why it stalled, because you have that core, the UMNO there. It'll be the same in Singapore, because in Singapore you have a singular elite. At least in Thailand you have competing elite. So with a singular elite, the chances of change are very, very minimum, and they tend to be just little, phrase on the side, So coming back to Myanmar, right? I think the challenge would be, where is the core, the residue of the military junta and its socialized, people in the ranks, its cronies, a lot of them who are in the civil servants, the foreign ministry and whatnot. in the universities, you know. So I think we need to be clinical, because I think sometimes part of the problem when we just say military junta, right? I think we need to add to that several, bits of the socialized core, the
Yeah,
cronies, right? Who form, that core that we need to be fully aware of.
right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think like to paraphrase what you said, I think the these dominant political actor domestically, whether they are the KMT in Taiwan or UMNO in Malaysia, or like the military, not a party, in Burma, or like the DAP in Singapore, right? They have embedded its themselves into different segments of the society and economy, basically, right? But it's not just simply like penetrating society, but it also penetrated our national economies, right? And so, but I think of all the places that you have mentioned, the Burmese case is becoming very, very crystal clear, because what we are looking at is not simply a society that is just simply opposing the military takeover. That basically the society woke up to the fact that we've been in bed with this monster for 70 years, and the society wants to kick the monster out of the bed, so to speak. And but what we are looking at in Burma is essentially a textbook revolutionary scenario, where the military is being disembedded, if you will, right, from the society itself, because it has been acting in manners that can only be described as Nazi or fascist-like occupier. Like, I mean, like, fascist occupation is something that historical memories across Southeast Asia, uh, remember very well. That fascist occupation of Japan, all kinds of crimes that they committed. But in the case of Burma, the Burmese people reach the same conclusion. These men in a Tamador uniform, they speak the same language of Burmese. They eat, they worship the same food. They speak, they go to the same pagodas and temples, but they do not behave, in manners that befit national armed forces. And so they've been designated, societally by the people as essentially occupiers who have overstayed their welcome. And so I think, like, of all the examples you mentioned, we have an extraordinary situation in Burma, yeah, and that is also worrying. But at the same time, it also gives a hope for a different type of future. Yeah, but that's where the tension is right now. Yeah, and so we are just past 1 hour. Huh? I want to give you the floor for your final comments and thoughts on this the attempt to control the content, and how that shift to attempt to control infrastructure, in Burma as well as across Asia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zani. To wrap up, I would just say that I think the first thing we want to note is the shift in tactics, from content censorship to infrastructure control and shutdown. So I think that's the first shift that we need to operate. Now, will they be successful? I don't think so. I think because it's the nature of the human spirit and its tenacity to fight back. And how's that happening? I think because media is fragmented, and it's all niche media. In order for the pushback to be successful, it has to be done in collaboration, right? So if all the niche voices come together, then they have strength in numbers, and the tenacity would hold on. So I think I want to end with a positive note. and also recognize at the same time, Myanmar offers us an opportunity to possibly witness that this, embedding of the authoritarian core, even something like the military. And when this happens, I think it will send shudders through the spines of the other autocrats in the region, and it gives credence to people's power, and a lot of it being played out over the internet and social media. And I'll leave it there for today.
Thank you so much, Dr. James Gomez. That we've been talking. I've been talking to the regional director of Asia Center, and for viewers who are interested to learn more about Asia Center's mission, and just Google Asia Center, and it has published fabulous, groundbreaking research publications. And I might say that it is very crucial for us from the region to make sure that our colleagues who are rooted in the region get a fair hearing, and their work is noted internationally, because the kind of the quality publications that Asia Center has put out, the more than half a dozen, they deserve international recognition, and they deserve to make a major impact across our region and beyond the Far East and across Asia. And if it were published by, say, the Western human rights mafia groups such as Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch, this would be headline news. The kind of quality product that James and his colleagues put out. And so that's why I think it's very important, while we focus on the substantive issues, we also extend one another spirit of solidarity, and because after all, we need to make sure that the voices from the region are taken seriously, not just Western-based human rights NGOs that come to do research in our societies, that know less about our own societies and issues than us. And so therefore I salute James and his colleagues for keeping on, getting the local knowledge out. This is not local. This is world-class knowledge that need to be promoted. And then thanks, James. I really appreciate you taking time to talking to me and to this forum. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Happy to be here, and see you soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye for now.